Good evening. Welcome to California Today. I'm Ling Zhang. Here is a preview of some of today's stories. More storms are expected to hit California over the weekend. Officials asking residents to evacuate areas that may see flooding. A Southern California woman is pleading to local authorities for help. Two of her family members have been detained by Chinese Communist Party officials. Officials in California are warning residents to brace for more storms that are expected to hit the northern region this weekend. In the last 2 weeks, the state has been battered by an unrelenting series of storms that left major destruction. Forecasters with the National Weather Service are expecting this weekend's storms to dump heavy rain on the state's northern region and deliver more mountain snow. State emergency officials are preparing for the likely possibility that California's Monterey Peninsula will become an island as the storm moves throughout the region. The San Francisco Bay Area is expected to be hit hardest. On Thursday, emergency officials were moving ambulances, firefighters, and first responders to the area around Monterey, Carmel, Pacific Grove, and Pebble Beach. Deputy Director Brian Ferguson of the California Office of Emergency Management told the Epoch Times that they are anticipating rivers in the area to rise and may cut residents off from the rest of the state. Matt Solom, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, told the Epoch Times that the next two storms will pick up Saturday and Sunday and are expected to ease up by Tuesday. Solom says heavy rain could drench the state as far south as Fresno and north to the Oregon border. Southern California may get lighter rain compared to the northern regions, but cooler temperatures with the storm could bring snow to the mountain areas. California has opened 25 emergency shelters across the state to aid residents affected by evacuations. Officials are also urging residents to stay safe and aware during the next few days. Authorities are warning residents against travel unless it's essential. Roads in one coastal peninsula may get so flooded and non-commutable that it could become an island.
The Salinas River in Central California continued to rise on Friday morning, threatening communities in Monterey County with more flooding. During a press conference on Wednesday, authorities issued evacuation orders between Highway 68 and the Salinas Lagoon.
It is likely that flooding will occur or may occur in the communities of Chular, Spreckles, parts of Las Palmas 1 and 2 could be cut off from essential services. We are urging the residents and businesses to make plans for your safe and efficient evacuation.
Nieto said they expect flooding to overtake the Salinas River and spread across the peninsula like in 1995. The National Weather Service Bay Area tweeted that the Salinas River near Spreckles is around 24 feet on Friday morning.
If you see road closures, it is imperative that you do not attempt to traverse these roads. Please turn around and don't drown. Residents may seek shelter in one of the county evacuation shelters with friends and family. Additionally, many of our partners, our business partners, our hotels on the peninsula are offering discounted accommodations for evacuees.
The flooding concerns on the roadways will likely impact the approaches to the bridges, low-lying intersections, and local surface streets. Residents both on the peninsula and in the Salinas area should expect to be cut off for 2 to 3 days. State and local officials are preparing for continued flooding through 9 p.m. Sunday.
The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power says it has captured about 10.6 billion gallons of stormwater. This is enough to serve over 100,000 households in the county, and it was accomplished through various stormwater capture infrastructure.
As Southern Californians continue to weather winter rainstorms, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, or LADWP, officials estimated that it captured about 10.6 billion gallons of water. This is enough to serve about 139,000 households in the county. Newly elected Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass said in a statement, "Given the magnitude of Los Angeles' water crisis, we must urgently act to capture rainfall and keep it from being washed away into the ocean." LADWP is capturing this precious resource through its various projects. More than $130 million have been invested in stormwater capture infrastructure since 2015, and over 20 stormwater capture projects have been built. The California Department of Water Resources reported this week that another storm is expected to hit in mid-January. Governor Gavin Newsom declared an emergency drought order last April. The emergency order is still in place even with the excessive rainfall.
For the first 4 years as California governor, Gavin Newsom has touted a budget surplus. But after years of spending and funding some of the country's most progressive policies, the state is now facing a budget deficit. Let's take a look at Newsom's proposed state budget for 2023.
California may be heading towards a budget deficit. That's according to Governor Gavin Newsom's latest budget proposal.
Here's the budget, $297 billion balanced budget, general fund of about $224 billion, a shortfall that is a little more modest than the one that the LAO projected. We net out, when the dust settles, and we can discuss that later, a shortfall of 22.5, again, compared to their estimate roughly of 25 billion.
Newsom says California likely won't collect enough money in taxes to pay for all of its obligations, leaving the 22.5 billion hole in its budget. Newsom also chose not to dip into the state's 35.6 billion savings account. Following the budget announcement, state Republican lawmakers say the state needs wiser spending plans.
Taxpayer cannot afford more empty promises and failures. We want results. We want safe communities. We want to invest in our students and their future. We want to get people off the streets and get them the help they need.
Nguyen pointed to the state's high gas prices and the growing homeless crisis.
A budget is about priorities, but with the governor's California way of spending, we have spent tens of billions of dollars and things have just gone worse. Drive down the street, turn on the news, go to the gas pump. There are harsh realities facing Californians up and down the state.
During Tuesday's budget announcement, Newsom vowed to protect programs that pay for all 4-year-olds to go to kindergarten and offer health care for illegal immigrants. Public schools were mostly shielded from cuts in Newsom's proposal, with one exception. He plans to cut $1.2 billion from a grant program that was aimed at paying for arts and music programs. The state's climate-related proposal also received some cuts. Newsom's $54 billion investment is now down to $48 billion. Despite the looming deficit, Newsom also proposed new spendings. He plans to allocate $93 million to combat fentanyl and other opioids that have led to an increase in overdose deaths. Newsom also wants to give local governments an extra $1 billion for homelessness programs. The governor and legislative leaders have until June to approve the spending plan.
We have a wait-and-see approach to this budget in terms of being cautious and being prepared in the May revise when there's more clarity.
The deficit was not a surprise. Newsom and the state's budget writers have been signaling for over a year that California was sailing into economic decline.
A Southern California woman is pleading for help from local authorities. She says 2 members of her family have been detained by Chinese authorities due to a spiritual tradition they practice.
Shu Zhikang lives in Roland Heights. Some of her family members are in China, but she hasn't heard from 2 of them since November.
From the beginning of November to mid-December, I tried to contact my sister and nephew, but I could never get a hold of them. Their phone always said they were off. I felt very worried about their safety.
Kang's sister, 60-year-old Shu Mei, had been living with her 33-year-old son, Gu Zhang, in Gujiao, a city in northern China, when the arrests were made. According to a notice sent to her nephew's wife, authorities said his arrest was due to him, quote, using cult organizations to break the law. They all practice Falun Dafa, a spiritual practice that combines meditative exercises and moral teachings based on truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. Fearing its growing popularity, the CCP started cracking down on those practicing in July 1999. Today, they are still being persecuted for their beliefs. After not hearing from the pair, Kang said another family member told her they were taken by Chinese Communist Party or CCP police to detention centers on August 31st, 2022. Police also seized their apartment and some of their personal property, including their vehicle, computer, and a printer.
After I heard of the news, I was very shocked and heartbroken. My tears kept falling because my sister and nephew practice Falun Gong. They were arrested because they are Falun Gong practitioners.
Since the arrests, no one has been able to visit the pair nor provide them with clothes or other personal belongings. According to Kang, her sister is in what's known as the city's 4th detention center, while her nephew is imprisoned in Taiyuan, about 15 miles away from Gujiao City, in the 3rd detention center. Kang said her sister and nephew's detentions have left family members even more concerned as the Chinese New Year approaches.
After my family heard that my sister and nephew were kidnapped, they felt tormented. They are suffering in pain every day. My 94-year-old father is in agony. He needs my sister and nephew to take care of him.
Kang says she has been appealing to local elected officials for help. According to Minghui.org, nearly 5,000 practitioners have lost their lives because of the persecution. The death toll is believed to be higher, as many cases go unreported under China's strict censorship.
We are going to take a short break, but here's a look at what we got for you when we come back. The CEO of a California-based company provided his insights on doing business in the Golden State. He says state policies ultimately deter businesses from the state. And from Salesforce to Amazon, thousands of U.S. workers have lost their jobs in brutal mass layoffs in 2022. Now, again, just days into 2023, two tech giants announced the latest round of mass layoffs. That and more on California Today. Welcome back to California Today. I'm your host, Liang Zhang. Earlier, I had the chance to speak with Michael Seifert, the CEO and founder of Public Square. The mobile app and marketplace's goal is connecting Americans with the communities and companies that share freedom-loving values. Seifert says California's legislative policies ultimately deter businesses away from the Golden State. All right, good morning, Michael. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So throughout the last few years, particularly during the pandemic, companies large and small were making headlines for choosing to relocate out of California. And these include big names like Oracle, Tesla, Charles Schwab, and the list goes on. Many of these companies point to reasons such as rising crime or policies that making doing business in California difficult. So can you tell us a little bit more about this trend and what's really happening?
I can. Well, unfortunately, California, for the last decade, has consistently been ranked as the worst state in the country to do business. And this is because of a myriad of different factors, both business owner facing in terms of extra regulation and burdens that are placed on the business owner to operate here, as well as cost of living challenges and overtaxation on the employees themselves. This state's leadership could learn from states like Texas, like Florida, like Arizona, and embrace policies and legislation that would lead to the flourishing and the positivity of the experience for business owners and employees alike that would hopefully drive economic activity here. But instead, they consistently choose the opposite, which are oppressive policies that ultimately deter companies away from the state, like the example you mentioned at the opening of the show.
Right. So can you mention some specific policies that deterring businesses from coming to the state?
Absolutely. So on the business owner side, we're placed with quite a few restrictions in terms of the operating procedures around our business. So some of these are more political, meaning there are a lot of cultural forces that are seeking to infringe upon our ability to operate a business freely with our worldview at the helm. And so these are policies that make sure that there are gender and diversity quotas on our boards and pushing for executive teams to operate in a certain way with compelled speech when we talk about things like gender expression and things that those cultural forces have driven a lot of businesses out of California, especially if businesses are operating with more of a Judeo-Christian or traditional worldview. Then there are also economic policies that are burdensome to business owners. California is obviously the state in the United States that pushes the hardest for green initiatives. But unfortunately, in the process, they've essentially socialized all of the energy sector in the state of California and then have placed the extra cost on business owners. And so when you hear Gavin Newsom say that he is shooting for California to be completely gas engine free by 2035 and then expects also for businesses to operate with their supply chains in a gas-free manner and prioritizing electrical sources from solar, wind. It's just unrealistic. It's unattainable. Our country's not there yet. Whether or not his pursuit is noble, it's unrealistic. And so what ends up happening is that when you're putting a strain on our grid, when you're putting a strain on our resources, when you also refuse to prioritize a lowering of taxes for the consumer on things like gas taxes that end up affecting the cost of living, you run into two problems. One is it's incredibly cost ineffective to operate a business here with all the extra regulatory tape because of the cultural and political and economic issues. It's also impossible to keep employees because you have employees that say, you know what, I can live, I can breathe, I can embrace my quality of life at half of the cost in Texas. I'm sorry, I'm going to take a job there instead. These policies are unsustainable, and I hope and pray that Gavin Newsom wakes up soon, as well as the rest of the legislature in California.
All right, you mentioned the word pray. Just last year, we saw a case in which a Bakersfield bakery owner refused to make wedding cakes for a same-sex couple because he violated her Christian beliefs. The couple sued her, and in the end, the judge ruled in favor of the bakery owner. So my question for you is, in this case, both sides argue their freedom of speech and expression. Can you speak to this relationship between businesses and consumers when the personal beliefs or political views differ and clash?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a great question. And obviously, I'm thankful that the judge ruled in favor of the business owner because this is freedom of religion at its finest. You have to be able to make sure in a free country that no laws or operating procedures infringe upon an individual's ability to themselves individually or for their business corporately operate their business, live their life with their worldview at the helm. And so for this business owner that says, I want to bake cakes and I want to serve my consumers and I want to hold fast to my convictions in the process, they should never be forced or compelled by law to violate those convictions in order to be able to operate their business. And so this is a pure case of freedom of religion. This has been established as our first freedom, because if you get this freedom wrong, every other freedom falls apart. It's why you see that in communist or socialist countries, the first thing the tyrants and the dictators do is they go after the freedom of religion. They make sure that the businesses that operate the economy, that serve as the backbone, have to forego their convictions in order to continue to operate. And so this idea of compelled speech or compelled service, it's fundamentally anti-American. So my message to the consumers that wanted that cake is find another bakery. There are plenty of other bakeries that I'm sure would bake your cake. Allow for this person to hold fast to their convictions and do not weaponize the state to try to infringe upon those rights allotted to that business owner in the public square.
Sure. Now, here's a personal question. You founded your company, Public Square, in San Diego, California, 2 years ago. Are you considering moving your company out of the state?
You know, as tempting as it is, and it is tempting, and I do not blame the businesses that have left. I think that there are more than enough reasons to get out of Dodge. But as for us, we have felt like there's a strong conviction to fight the fight within California's borders. And so we have to incur a lot of extra costs. We have to deal with the fact that we have to hire some remote talent at times because we can't get them to move to California. We have to deal with all of those issues. At the end of the day, though, we believe that California's fight is our fight. We actually want to see if we can rescue this state, and we can have a seat at the table to be able to move the economic policies, the legislation of this state toward our favor. We'll never be able to win if we all leave. And so as as starry-eyed and as hopeless as it may seem at times, we are pressing in, and we're in California for the long haul.
Right. Well, you heard about the news. In-N-Out Burger is moving to Tennessee. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm proud of them. I celebrate the expansion of In-N-Out. I think they're a phenomenal company that operates with their Christian values at the helm, and I'm grateful for that. I think we need more companies that are unafraid to showcase exactly what they believe about the world, and I'm obviously a fan when great quality of product meets these values that have made our country so special in the first place. In-N-Out's the perfect example of that type of business, and I think more of the country should experience its goodness.
All right, Michael Seifert, founder and CEO of Public Square. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Tens of thousands of employees in the tech sector are facing layoffs as tech giants announce the plans to cut jobs. Executives at Salesforce, Amazon, and Facebook said it was a result from rapid hiring during the COVID-19 pandemic.
More layoffs are expected in the tech industry. The San Francisco-based company Salesforce employed about 49,000 people in January 2020. But now, the company plans to lay off about 8,000 employees, or 10% of its workforce. Salesforce workers who lose their jobs will receive nearly 5 months of compensation, according to the company. Similarly, the e-commerce giant Amazon plans to remove over 18,000 positions from its company, as announced by its CEO, Andy Jassy, on January 4th.
And one of the reasons why companies start to lay off people is because it's the first thing that they can do to actually save money. And the type of employees that they might be cutting, or they're going to be executives that have big salaries, and that could affect the bottom line and save Amazon quite a bit of money.
Tomasulo is a financial expert. He says many company leaders did not anticipate the economic downturn. Amazon's CEO Jassy said this year's review has been more difficult given the uncertain economy and that they've hired rapidly over the last several years. The company says several teams are impacted, but the majority of the eliminations are in their Amazon stores and PXT organization, or People, Experience, and Technology Unit. As for Salesforce, CEO Mark Benioff told employees he blamed himself for the layoffs, writing, quote, "As our revenue accelerated through the pandemic, we hired too many people leading into this economic downturn we're now facing, and I take responsibility for that." Analysts say the wave of layoffs sweeping through the tech sector could stretch into 2023 as companies rush to cut costs.
Because they didn't look 2 years down the line and say, hey, a recession might come and we're gonna have to cut, right? Because in good times, people want to spend money. Right. In good times, they want to hire people. They want to, do that next project. It is, so when I heard, at a Salesforce, people were asking, is this a leadership problem? And we are seeing some of these leaders do a really poor job at really, of anticipating the downturn that we're going into.
Jassy announced, "To those impacted by these reductions, I want you to know how grateful I am for your contributions to Amazon and the work you have done on behalf of customers." Amazon said they're working on providing compensation packages and will communicate with impacted employees starting on January 18th.
That's all we got for you tonight. We'd like you to join us again on California Today every weekday at 8:30 p.m. Make sure to check out our broadcasts on our California Today webpage. You can find it at ntd.com/California-today. You can also find all of our top latest clips there, ready to share with friends and family. Send us a message on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or through our email, california.today@ntd.com. I'm Lang Zhang. Have a wonderful weekend.